Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you here and all of you who are joining us online right now. It's wonderful to have you here. So we're going to start a little 3-week series that we've got going here called Difference Makers. And it's because we've got like this belief or way of thinking around here as a church, and it's that we don't really have attenders for the most part, right? Because I wouldn't look at you all as attenders, like you all are the church, right? You are the difference makers of who we are as a church and what we're doing. And so I want to spend a little time and talk about in what ways do we really make a difference through this series so that it just kind of strengthens us as difference makers in our lives, at home, through our church. And we're going to look at a very simple but really profound lesson of Jesus that gets to the heart of even how we make a difference. And it takes place in a conversation. And by the way, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 22, if you want to turn there. And if not, we will put the verses up on the screen. Jesus is in this conversation, and it becomes a bit of a rabbinic style conversation. They're gonna ask him a question, and the question that they're really getting at is, so Jesus, you as a rabbi, what is most important about what you are trying to do or establish in your followers? How do you read Torah in a way that establishes what is most important? And for a rabbi, that would be known as their yoke. And so if a rabbi talked about their yoke or whatever, it was kind of like their way. What are the issues with that? What is most important? So here's what happens. Matthew chapter 22, starting in verse 35, and he begins to have this conversation again now with another scholar or rabbi. And it says this: one of them, an expert in the law, and that's not like just like a lawyer like we would think of a lawyer, but like a rabbi or a religious scholar. An expert in the law tested him with this question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Now, what Jesus does there, no one would have been shocked by. Everyone that heard him say that would have, in fact, they would have been expecting that. And what he's quoting is part of what is known as the Shema. And so he's saying the first commandment, okay, is essentially the Shema. And the Shema is this prayer that was actually a practice for the Jews in the first century that they would have practiced probably every evening and every morning. And it goes back to when Moses was first introducing this young generation of Israelites into the promised land. Moses wasn't gonna go with them, but now he's got to anchor their hearts in something that's going to prepare them as they go and now live this new kind of life with God in the promised land. And here's Moses. Think of the pressure that Moses is facing, right? And so some of his early words that he says, and this is all out of the book of Deuteronomy. So Moses had a lot of words for them, okay? But some of the early words that he had was this idea where he said, listen, Israel, or hear, O Israel. And in Hebrew, the word hear is Shema. So this is where it gets its name. And this is exactly what Jesus is quoting here. He says, like, I want you to hear these words. Let them sink in. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love him, right? And so, and here's kind of the command, right? Here's you, right? And here's, God. And so here's the first command. Hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. There it is. And everyone would have went like, yep, okay, I got that. Now, the second command is what would really distinguish rabbis from other rabbis, okay? And typically what we would probably expect is that now the guy that asked him this question would now ask the next question, be like, okay, so now what's the follow-up command? What's command number 2 in all of this? And it's interesting here, Jesus kind of beats him to the punch. He says this, look back at the passage. It says, and the second command is like it. So Jesus is gonna say there's a second command in this, and I don't have time to go into it. It's really cool what Jesus does in this moment where he says it is like it. He is gonna make a comparison between these two in a very subtle, profound way. But we'll save that for another message because we're actually gonna get to that in a cool way here at the end. And I'm just saying that out loud so that I don't tempt myself to go that direction right now, all right? So he goes on, right? And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commands. Whoa, this is big stuff. So now he says the second one, right? There's you, and here's your neighbor with the hat, right there, right? And he says, here's the second command, right? I want you to love your neighbor. These 2 commands, he says, all the law and all the prophets, he's talking about all of Scripture, hang on these 2 things. And now everybody understands what kind of rabbi Jesus is, where his bent, where his leaning is. And this was a big deal in Jesus' day. In fact, there were 2 very dominant rabbis that had come before this, Hillel and Shammai, who had different ways. They both agreed on commandment number 1, but when it got to commandment number 2, they really parted ways. And so rabbis most of them would go one of 2 ways. They might veer off in different ways, but they were in one of these 2 major veins. And so the moment Jesus says the second one is to love your neighbor, everyone goes, so he is in the stead of like Hillel. Hillel is the one that would have leaned more to this idea of we love God, and now how we treat people in a loving, ethical way. Like this is how you roll all of this out. But make no mistake about it. It begins with this idea with this question of what does it mean to love God, right? And there would be a long list of all the things that they would say, here are all the things that we do to love God. And in so many ways, it's a tension we feel, maybe in a different way than in the first century, but we feel this tension of what does it mean to love God? I wanna love God. I wanna be devoted to God. How do I go about doing that if I really love God, right? And you think about things like, I bet God wants me to pray, or go to church, or, read my Bible. And we think about those things because we think about this vertical relationship that we want to have with God, right? And so they all would have started there. And then, then what do you do next? And that would kind of describe where a rabbi would go. Now, Jesus does a very interesting thing through his ministry. He begins to blur some lines with these 2 things, right? Because everyone would have said, this is the first priority. You've got to do this. This is most important, and you do this first. And Jesus walked through his ministry and just kind of blurred those lines. But, I think for you and I, as we feel this tension, and we think about this question, there's some things that Jesus offers that I think are really important. Because we get pulled into this tension more than we realize. I remember being a part of a Bible study when I was pretty young. I think it was in college, maybe high school. And it was like, this is gonna be like spiritual meat. I even remember in the first Bible study we had, the leader said, this actually isn't a Bible study. This is a discipleship group. And I'm like, wow, okay. Don't call this a Bible study. This is a discipleship group. And we're gonna get into this stuff deep. And man, and I bet there was only, 5 or 6 of us in this group. And once we started, like no one else was left, no one else could come into this group because we had to be devoted to this thing. And we probably met, I don't know, close to once a week for about a year. And I remember going through this thing. We even had flashcards for memorizing Bible verses. And I remember like the first time showing up and not being real clear on the Bible verses I was supposed to have. And after that, I was like, oh man, okay, I'm gonna make sure I get on top of that next time. Because that felt a little embarrassing because everybody else had their Bible verses down and I didn't. And I remember we even worked on what it would mean to pray for more lengthy periods of time. You know, like as a young guy, it's just like hyperactive and everything. It's just like, pray for like 5 minutes? Whoa. And he's like, no, we're gonna have you praying for like an hour. And sure enough, man, we worked on all this stuff. And the priority, right? This was about being a disciple of Christ, but the priority, it was like on prayer and Bible study and spiritual disciplines. And we talked about all this stuff and practiced all of this stuff. And there were things about it that were really, really very, very good. But it's interesting. I think back on that group, and I still remember some of the flashcards. I probably might even have a few of the verses that I memorized way back then that I might still know a few of them. I don't know. I can go the other direction real fast and losing stuff. But I think back on that. You know what I can't remember? I don't remember one of their names. I can picture some of their faces. I can't even remember the leader's name. And he invested so much in us. We all invested a lot in that. And I thought about that this week. It's interesting how much I felt the need to prioritize these things. And yet, I can't even remember the name of any of those guys that I was in that group with. And there's something that Jesus does that's interesting through his ministry. He takes this idea that day when he's asked, what's the greatest command? And he says, it's here's number one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then he says, and the second one is like it, love your neighbor. He begins to narrow something, and you see it all through his ministry as he narrows what he means by this. But here's what I want to do. I want to look at a moment near the end of his ministry where he very overtly points out what he has been doing through his whole ministry when it comes to this understanding of what matters most. What is he really all about? And it takes place at the Last Supper, right? Jesus goes into Jerusalem for the very last time, and he knows in just a matter of hours, he's gonna be arrested, prosecuted, he's gonna be killed on the cross, he's gonna be crucified, and then he's gonna rise from the dead. Like this is the end and the climax of his ministry. And he has this beautiful moment where he is with his disciples. And I won't go into it, but it is picturesque of Moses. In fact, there's something that Jesus actually says that is probably a kind of hint that when Moses, way back when, is about ready to send the Israelites into the promised land. And he's like, I want you to hear this. I want you to anchor into this. And Jesus has a very similar moment with his disciples after they have had the Last Supper together. And I want you to look at what he says here in this. And it's found in the Gospel of John, John chapter 13. So turn with me to John chapter 13 and look at what he does here. Verse 34 here. He says this, a new command I give you. And I'm just telling you, for a rabbi to say that, a new command I give you, like he didn't use those words back earlier, maybe a year or two earlier, when he was asked that question, what is the greatest commandment? But he is narrowing it now. For a rabbi to say, a new command I give you, is taking on a level of authority that few, if any, rabbis would ever take on. But Jesus is. He's saying, a new command I give you. I want you to understand this. I want you to anchor your lives into this. Kind of like when Moses is saying to the Israelites, listen, as you go into that new land, I need you. I need you to understand this and hold this, right? And so Jesus says, a new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another, right? And so what he's done as he narrows this, right? There's this idea, here you are, and he says, here's my command, right? Your neighbor, that person you know, right? I want you to love them as I have loved you. And notice what he hasn't done here is, and as we unpack this, you'll see it's not like he's picking the old number 2 over the old number 1 or switching them. He is combining them in a new way that creates a new kind of command and a new understanding for us, okay? And the reason I want to get at this is because when we understand what Jesus is doing here, it should do something in us for understanding how we make a difference in this world, right? So he says, I want you to love one another. And the way that you love God in this really is going to be how you love other people, right? He says, by this, the way you love one another, by this, other people will see that, and that's how they will know that you love me, right? The way we love one another, there's gonna be moments where you love someone else, but the way it will be seen or experienced is, this is how you love God. This is not a command that says we don't need to love God anymore, right? This is not a command that says that doesn't matter. But there's this old way of thinking that we can get pulled into, right? And it's like, I just want to be devoted to God, and I want to be a good Christian, and I want to make sure I love God. And we can start thinking through all the things that we can do and miss what this is about. And in the weirdest of ways, your devotion to loving God can actually get in the way of you loving God. And so Jesus says, just so we're perfectly clear on this, I want my followers to love other people, because when you start loving other people, you're loving me. In fact, it becomes evident that you're loving me in all of this. And you may be here and you're saying, but Glenn, I want to feel close to God. Look around you. Who is there that you can love? Because there is a way of loving some other people that will draw you closer to God. I know some of you are just like I want to be the kind of person that just prays with like a sincerity and a depth, and that's awesome. Look around you. Who is there that you can pray for? Because if your prayer life is part of loving others, I promise you, it will be a prayer life that is loving God, and that is a beautiful kind of prayer life. If you want to care about God, look around you and care for somebody around you. Because what Jesus is telling us here in this moment is the way you love God is by loving other people. That's a truly new command from what all the rabbis were trying to sort through and figure out. And God is saying, and Jesus is saying, I don't want you to miss this. Now, here's the worry, right? There's this worry that we all have that if I don't start here on the vertical, right? I could get myself in trouble. In fact, if I started on the horizontal, isn't it possible that if I just start trying this, if I make the horizontal thing the most important thing in my life, like I could go and love others in some way that would just like reject God, and I don't want to go down that path. I could love others in some way that would just be a compromise to all of these things that are so important to God. And I get that worry and I get that concern. But I want to come back to just two things with that concern, because it's a valid concern. First one is this. Jesus said it, not me. Start with loving other people. Jesus is the one that said, I want you to start there. You're not giving up on loving me when you love others the way I have loved you. And catch what he says here. The starting point really isn't about who any of us love. The starting point really is about how God loves us. And now we turn with that love and love others, right? But here's the second thing. And I just say this from my own personal experience because not that I'm proud of it, but the truth is I would have been a person at one point in my walk that would have argued. I would have said, yeah, I know what Jesus said in that passage, but let me tell you why really you got to start with God in this, okay? Like I would have found some way to make the argument that, sounded good, but in my heart, I would worry that if I or other people didn't start first with God and started with love others first, that's just the fast track to disaster in your life. But can I just tell you what I have watched in the lives of it's got to be thousands of people by now, and in my own life, rarely, if ever, have I watched Christians who start with, I'm gonna love other people out of the love that I feel like I've gotten from God, and end up missing what it means to love God. But I have watched countless times, more times than I like to see, again, with me and with others, where I could start in my heart and mind that I'm going to love God and fail miserably to love other people. In fact, I've done harm in the name of loving God, in treating somebody else in some way that missed what Jesus was saying. This is just what's most important to me, okay? Now, here's the other dynamic that plays out in this, and this is the thing that I really want you to get out of today. The dynamic of what Jesus is pulling us into is what he's saying is, if you want to make a difference, if you want to be a difference maker, you can't do this alone. You don't become a spiritual giant, right? Because this is what all those rabbis are like, how do we become like a spiritual giant? How do we become that kind of follower of God that God looks at and goes, wow, that's amazing. You know what? When I dived into that discipleship group, that's what I wanted. I wanted to, someday I want to grow up spiritually and become like a spiritual father. I want to become like a spiritual giant. I really want to become that. And I kept going back and back again and again and again to all of this stuff, right? But you know what? You could do that by yourself. I could go and memorize all those Bible verses. I could go and pray all I want. I could go and study the Bible. And all I needed was me. But I wasn't going to make much of a difference. And the beautiful thing about what Jesus is saying here is to be a difference maker. As soon as he said, I want you to begin loving other people, he's saying, you can't be a difference maker alone. You can't love alone. If you're going to practice love, you've got to practice it with somebody, right? You don't walk out the door and just say, I'm love today, and I'm gonna there needs to be another person involved in this that you're interacting with at a relational level in all of this. And that's the part, like Jesus is pulling us towards relationship. In fact, he's saying, right, you want to make a difference in the world and show the whole world who I am and what I'm about? You can't really do it by yourself. Because the place where you actually start loving other people, this is what starts revealing the beauty of who God is. This is where people go, oh, that person loves God. And it requires that we need each other. It means that we engage this world relationally in all of this. And it changes something in us that inherently, I think, pulls us back to a better vertical relationship, not just a horizontal relationship. I'm gonna use a fun example here. How many of you, and I know they did a remake on this, I didn't see it, because the first one was the classic, right? How many of you have seen the movie Footloose? Okay, so like maybe half or something, right? So there's a movie you got to go see some point, and that's right. Footloose with Kevin Bacon and John Lithgow, which I find interesting. Out of all the movies John Lithgow has done, he's always like some terrible, villain. And in this, he's like the preacher in the little town. He's the pastor of the town. But his character, right, in Footloose he is this pastor of this little church, and he's kind of a leader in the town that hold that other view, right? That hold this view right here, right? He wants to honor God. He wants his little town to honor God and be good. And of course, it's got to be a Southern Baptist church. I don't know if that's true, but it's got to be, because there's dancing's not allowed, right? And so this new kid comes into town, this high schooler, Kevin Bacon's character, and he wants to, have a dance for the prom. And it's like, it's like Scandal City, right? Because we know God doesn't want dancing, right? And of course, Lithgow's character is like, we've got to honor God, and we've got to like I'm going to love God. I'm going to stand strong on this thing, and we can't allow this to happen. And he just lives so squarely in this until he finds that his daughter is on the other side of this issue, because the town's divided over whether or not to have a dance for the prom, right? And his daughter is on the other side of it. And there's this classic scene in the movie where it's like a Saturday, and Lithgow's character is working on his sermon in an empty church building, and his daughter walks in, and they have this conversation. And it becomes heated and painful. And Lithgow is trying to honor God and to stick to these things. But he's faced with this dilemma. I can be right, or I can have a relationship with my daughter. And it really messes with him. And then he watches as some of the people in his church are trying to live out what he's saying on this, right? And so it turns into a little bonfire at the library as they're trying to get rid of bad stuff, and he just watches this happen. And he chooses to have a relationship with his daughter. He struggles through it. But here's the thing that I want you to think about in this, if you've seen the movie. As he struggles through this, and he actually chooses, how do I figure out how to love my daughter, right? And other people first. You know what happens to him as a pastor? He becomes a much better pastor. He becomes much better in leading them in prayer and worship and understanding the Bible. And like the thing that didn't get damaged was his relationship with God. In fact, it was in the struggle of what it meant to love his daughter and love other people that it made him a better pastor. It enhanced his relationship with God. And I think that's the thing that Jesus is getting at in this, is that you may feel this tension between the vertical and the horizontal. But the reality is he's saying, I'm gonna just mess with you, and I'm gonna unfold all of it all in together. And what you'll find is, as you start to love one another, as you enter into relationship, it will do something for you in your relationship with God. But much more than that, it becomes your way of being because when we live in this, we become difference makers, right? Jesus goes on and he explains, he says, this is how the world is gonna understand what I'm up to because of this, not the vertical only. You think about Jesus's mission, right? God so loved the whole world, right? Jesus is wanting this to go to the whole world. What I love about what he did with his disciples that night up in the upper room is he kind of took that whole mission and he's kind of like, guys, there's this whole huge mission, but you know where it gets to start? With you and one other person that you're gonna love. It's that simple. Just take that step and it becomes an amazing thing in all of this. And it's because of that as a church, cultivating more and more relationships in this vein is really, really important to us around here, right? Love isn't just a nice thing. Love is like the very best way to make the ultimate difference in our city and in your families and in our neighborhoods and in our church. And the more we learn to live out of this, the greater the difference we'll make. And so here's my challenge to you this morning, is that if you don't have relationships where you get to step in and both experience what it is to love and be loved, I want to challenge you to take a step to be deliberate about moving into more relationships like that. As a church, we are being more and more intentional about what we do with groups around here to actually foster more of this. I want all of us to take a step. It's important to me that you would have an ever-growing, more intimate relationship with your Heavenly Father. I want that sense of that vertical relationship to be something that is strong and beautiful that you have. But here's what I know, and here's what matters to me. If you don't go here, what you'll end up with may not be what you really want. That's not what I want for you. I want you to have a vertical relationship with God that is everything that Christ described in it. I want you to be able to have the opportunity to step into groups where you get to wrestle with this. Because when you get to wrestle with this, it will make you into the kind of person that can take this further and further out in there. To be able to have places of community where you get to wrestle with what it means to, because this will be a struggle for you at times. It's been a struggle for me. It's been a struggle for everyone that steps into this. But there are a couple of things that I know you will experience if you take a step towards being in this kind of community. And if you don't have that kind of community, I want to encourage you. In fact, after the service is over, and I'm going to make a point of trying to end early this morning so that you actually have time to go over and visit some of our wonderful people with groups to explore the possibility of getting into a group or signing up for a group, finding out more about them. Because this really is important. If we're going to be a difference-making kind of church, we've got to be building relationships out of what Jesus said we need to be anchoring ourselves into. And if you join one of those groups, or you have that kind of group, or are willing to step into it, there's a couple of things that you're going to experience. And so let me just say a couple of quick things here on this. First, you will experience the difference yourself, right? That there's a kind of difference that you experience when you get to be involved in community that is built out of what Jesus was teaching in all of this. And I say this because, I've belonged to a lot of different groups over the years. I'm looking at two people that belong in my own small group. It's why it's got me emotional all of a sudden. So I'm a part of a small group, and I don't even know if we would call ourselves a small group, but we are. And we've been a group for probably close to 30 years, okay? We started off as a group, and we were young and wild-eyed and had great dreams of all the things that we were gonna do. And by God's grace, like we have just stayed together as a group and have morphed through all of these things. And who we've become as a group is so wildly different than where we started. In fact, I would say, I'm not gonna look at them right now, okay? When we started as a group, we could have been like a bunch of those old rabbis that Jesus were talking about that were all of the same vein, agreement on every single thing. We would have had the same opinion on just about everything. And nowadays, that is just not who we are as a group. We don't agree on politics. We don't agree on foreign policy or tariffs or domestic policy. We don't even agree on everything about every Bible verse we read. We don't even agree about aliens or Bigfoot or dogs or cats, okay? Like we're wildly different on so many things. We don't know if we're chicken, beef, or vegan people half the time, okay? Like but we are still a group that has learned what it means to step into this. And so one of the things that I know is that whenever I step through the door of wherever that group is meeting, you guys are crazy, I always know there is a place for me. Doesn't matter what we disagree about or what our week has been like, or even if there's conflict, I know that there's a place for me. And you know what that does for me? That helps me know that in my relationship with God, there's a place for me. Because if I'm experiencing that difference in community with some other followers, it just becomes easy to feel like I've got a place with God. When I walk through that door and things have been difficult, and you know what? Over 30 years, you're gonna have some really difficult moments. There's gonna be time in life where things are gonna get hard. To walk through that door and know that there is a group of people that will care about me and will be on my side. Man, it's easy to go, God, I think you're on my side. God, I think you care about me. All of a sudden, it begins to strengthen your sense of relationship with God. That other group, and again, I learned some really good things in that other group. Some beautiful things that I probably use today. But it has nowhere impacted my life like the group where I've constantly found and have struggled through love. Like, you will feel the difference. And my tears are tears of wanting each and every one of you to have the same thing. If you don't have a place where when you show up, you know you belong, then find a group like that. And by the way, the groups that we're seeking to create and build out of all of this, we're being very intentional about not letting them become groups that just become vertical or just horizontal. Like, I don't want you to belong to one of our groups and a year from now become way smarter about the Bible, pray 10 times more, engage in spiritual disciplines, but have not experienced love in deep and meaningful ways. Because that's not okay. I want you to experience what Jesus said is my new command. This is the thing that I want you to anchor into. Now, second thing, and I'll keep this even shorter. If you dare take a step into that kind of community, not only will you experience the difference, I promise you, you will make a difference. You will make a difference in moments that you don't even realize that you're making a difference. You will make a difference in the moments that you do realize it. But here's the deal. I know each and every one of you, you have spiritual gifts that God has given you. I know that each and every one of you, you have been through experiences. Some of them are hard. Some of them taught you new things. And all of that has made you a wealth of beautiful things that can be a gift to other people. And I would love to see you give that gift away. And one of the most beautiful ways we get to give that away is when we're in a relationship where we can love someone else. And you will watch that you will make a difference in your wisdom, in your care. Sometimes it's just being present. But you will make a difference. And there's something beautiful about getting to experience that. So I'm going to end right now because now I'm making it so we're not going to end early. So we're going to end right now, okay? Get in a group. Get in a group. Find community where you can practice what Jesus taught as a new commandment.